17th of March is St. Patrick's Day. He's the patron saint of Ireland, and he is associated with bringing Christianity to Ireland. He is celebrated in Ireland, but not just in Ireland. He's famous all over the world. There isn't a country in the world that isn't green because of Tourism Ireland's global greening. It's incredible how much our patron saint is remembered all through the world. He must be as famous as St. Nicholas at Christmas time. But everywhere goes green because it's a celebration of Irishness, our Irishness and those who are Irish abroad. But the festival itself and the feast day, it's really important because it's associated with shamrocks, it's associated with parades, it's associated with crosses or little rosettes, but also it's associated with a celebration of our Irishness. That's really it. And it's very much an important day throughout the Irish calendar, and thankfully it happens during Lent, which is incredible for us because we get a day off during Lent because our patron saint allowed us. Everyone else has to do full Lent, but thankfully the Irish get to take a day off, and then we can indulge in all the things we've given up for Lent. Lent was such a strict time in Ireland. It was a time where there was you had to give up meat, you had to give up your dairy and your eggs and also alcohol, and then you also there was no dancing, there was no celebrations. It was a very austere time, and thankfully around St. Patrick's Day you got a break from all of that. But that's why there was a build-up of eggs for Easter, and that's why just before Lent starts at Shrove Tuesday, you use all your eggs and milk and have your pancakes. So it's kind of trying to use it up because you won't, and fatten yourself up for Lent, for during Lent, because you won't have enough food. So I suppose St. Patrick's Day falls in the middle of that. So then people kind of tended to go a little bit wild because they got the freedom to eat and drink and celebrate, and that's why we have a term called put the fóric, like the St. Patrick's Day pot, where you might have an alcoholic drink and thrown the shamrock that you wore during the day into it and knocked that back. So there was a sense of a lot of drinking around St. Patrick's Day. The temperance movement really targeted that, and they had their small parades, often from the church just after Mass on celebrating the Saint's Day, and then that would be a small band or marching band. They knew that people drank too much and in excess, and a lot of the times the pubs were closed then for that, and it's only in the last few years, St. Patrick's Day, that the pubs are open. When we think of St. Patrick's Day, we often think of parades, and parades are so much part of the festival now. Our festival is now almost a 2-week festival, but centre stage is often our St. Patrick's Day parade. In general, we associate St. Patrick's Day with the parade, and this is something that is very important here, but it's actually something that we took from abroad. We didn't invent the parading on St. Patrick's Day. We took it back really as a tradition. The Irish Diaspora abroad, they would have started the parading. It probably started in America, Canada, Australia, wherever Irish people were. But often it was a day where Irish regiments in the armed forces were given the day to actually parade and march and play music, marching bands. And it was a way of kind of letting them celebrate their Irishness, but also kind of a bit of a recruitment drive as well. So those traditions and those processions and parades, they started getting bigger and bigger abroad. Big time starting parades in Ireland was really around the 1950s, and that was a way of celebrating Irish industry. So it was kind of like milk floats and beverage floats and different things, and so they were the start of the parades. But we've taken a lot of our traditions of parading and the sense of colour and style and wonder. We've taken a lot of that from the parades abroad that are so huge. So if you're attending your St. Patrick's Day parade, on St. Patrick's Day, we tend to wear a small bit of shamrock. Shamrock is really associated with St. Patrick, and it's said that he explained how there were three gods in one, and used the three leaves of the shamrock to explain that. I think Celtic peoples would have understood triads very well, but we really associate that shamrock with St. Patrick. And that was a time we would collect shamrock, and it would be sold around the times of the parades if people hadn't got their shamrock. It was being sold coming up to the festival, and it would be collected. Sometimes children collected it and then tried to sell it, and it was being sold in the streets of Dublin the turn of the century. So very much associated with the day. In fact, the first transatlantic flight from Shannon in 1952 to New York had 100,000 pieces of shamrock on it just for the celebrations of the day and having your Irish shamrock away abroad. But anyway, that's one of the things you might be wearing still at your parade. A more religious element to the festival was for children was to make a St. Patrick's Day cross or a badge, and this is St. Patrick's cross, and often our St. Patrick's Day badges will have the red cross incorporated in, but also some other crosses and different lovely bits of ribbon on them. Sometimes paper as well, they might be made by paper, and then these would be made as badges and put on, the children would wear these to the parades. And the terminals at the end of each ribbon, they kind of often turn into a bit of a rosette at the end. And now when you look at our lovely crosses and you see the size of them, you can really associate with them with those bright green shiny satin rosettes that we wore as children and that we still can get today, and that's associated with St. Patrick's Day. And maybe you probably now have a gold piece of shamrock on the inside, but really the rosettes were worn by children on St. Patrick's Day, and these are the start. That is their origin. These rosettes, their origin is definitely in our St. Patrick's Day badges. So when we think of St. Patrick's Day, we definitely think of the Irish Diaspora, and it's a time for remembrance. It's a time for families to have a meal in honour of the saint, but it's also to remember those who have gone abroad and emigrated, because quite often families never saw the person who emigrated again. And it was a time to sit down and remember them at a family meal, and to know and to let them know that you're thinking of them. A lot of people got in touch around St. Patrick's Day, sending a card, sending a postcard, maybe sending a prayer card. And this was a tradition that was very strong, goes back to the turn of the 1900s anyway, and very popular around the 80s when An Post had the St. Patrick's Day cards and postcards, and still now we have them, and still now people get in touch. It's a way of sending our love to our families who are abroad. So St. Patrick's Day, getting in touch was very important. But other than having your meal, you might also want to go and visit a place of prayer, maybe a St. Patrick's Day well. There are lots of holy wells associated with St. Patrick, and lots of places associated with him, because when the saint went from place to place, he might have dropped his crozier on the ground and stamped it, and as a result a holy well would spring up. And now we would have these thubber fórigs and these wells associated with St. Patrick. And we know that people climb the Reek, and it's Croagh Patrick, and it's in Mayo here. It's a pilgrimage site associated with St. Patrick, but we know that they climbed it on his feast day on the 17th of March. We know that even from the annals, we know that in 1113, 40 pilgrims were killed when the Reek was struck by lightning. So we know that even on the 17th of March, people were practicing that religious element and that pilgrimage element on St. Patrick's Day. And I suppose there are so many people who will have a St. Patrick's Day place or association, and they'll realise around them that there's somewhere down the road that's called Patrick or Porrig in Irish, and that you mean that is associated with your home place, probably has that, or a place associated with St. Patrick. And I think it's a time for people to realise that it's everywhere around them. Patrick is everywhere around us. We just have to tune into him.